There are moments when you wonder if this election campaign is turning into the stupidity Olympics. First, we find Tory officials place bets on the election date. Yet another is under investigation tonight. But now it turns out a Labour candidate placed a bet on himself to lose. Betting on yourself to lose may or may not be in breach of the rules, but wouldn't you ask yourself whether it felt entirely appropriate or sensible or even right? Lord save us. Also on News at 10 tonight. Julian Assange on the cusp of freedom. Protesters set Kenya's parliament building on fire. What will the pundits say now? It's another dismal night in Cologne, even if England do escape their group. And
dream of happy things.
The granddaughter of a Holocaust survivor brings back to life his music that the Nazis silenced.
This is ITV News at 10 with Tom Bradby.
Good evening. We've already overused the phrase "you couldn't make it up" in this election, but you do have to wonder what is going on with our parliamentary candidates. Two Conservatives were already being investigated over whether they bet on a July election. Today, they were dropped by the party after days of damaging headlines and calls from the Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, to do so. But then tonight, Sir Keir suspended one of his own over claims, if you can believe it, that he bet that he would lose the vote in the Suffolk constituency, where he's due to stand. And if he wasn't going to before, there is certainly a much higher chance he will now. With 9 days until the election, that's all. This scandal looks like it will run and run. Indeed, 5 more police officers have questions to answer about election betting. So too, a Conservative member of the Welsh Senedd. So where will it all end?
Today, the betting scandal plaguing the Tories spread further, and it now seems to be an issue in our politics. Labour have withdrawn support for a parliamentary candidate, Kevin Craig, who bet on himself to lose in the constituency he's standing in. In a statement, Mr Craig said, "I put a bet on the Tories to win here with the intention of giving any winnings to local charities. While I did not place this bet with any prior knowledge of the outcome, this was a huge mistake for which I apologise unreservedly." The Prime Minister may have been busy entertaining the Japanese Emperor today, but after weighing up the odds, he too had to withdraw support for 2 of his candidates. Craig Williams, his closest parliamentary aide, and Laura Saunders, both for allegedly betting about the date of the election. 2 other senior figures within his party, Miss Saunders' husband, Tony Lee, and Nick Mason, are also under investigation, as is Russell George, member of the Welsh Parliament, who tonight became the 5th Tory under the spotlight. But after days of questioning, there are some asking why it took Rishi Sunak so long to act.
The party did take the time to look at these allegations properly, consult with the Gambling Commission to make sure this action doesn't prejudice what the Gambling Commission is doing. It did take, 5 or 6 days to do that, but now that's been done, decisive action has been taken.
All candidates who have had support withdrawn will still appear representing their party on ballot papers because it's too late to change them. Today, Mr Williams posted this online, where he didn't clarify whether he used insider information when placing his bets.
I committed an error of judgment, not an offence, and I want to reiterate my apology directly to you. I'm fully cooperating with routine inquiries for the Gambling Commission, and I intend to clear my name.
So good to see you.
The Liberal Democrats have raised concerns about what happens if either Tory candidate were to be elected MPs.
I think the next thing we need a bit of clarity on is if any of them are elected, are they going to have the whip? So no, I don't think they've gone quite far enough.
A member of the Prime Minister's Close Protection Unit is also facing a criminal investigation over alleged bets. And today we were told that 5 more police officers are being assessed. It is fast growing into a full-blown crisis about the culture, behaviour and ethics of those in positions of authority around the country. Shihab Khan, News at 10, Westminster.
And Robert joins me. Where do we start? I mean, yeah. Over to you.
You're lost for words. It's been quite the day, hasn't it? I mean, 5 police officers now being investigated for election bets, a Tory member of the Welsh Parliament. We've got this thing which I just don't understand about the Scottish secretary allegedly telling the BBC he'd won £2,100 from a bet and now saying that was supposed to be a joke. And then Kevin Craig, a Labour candidate, bets on himself to lose. Keir Starmer gets really cross, says he can't be a candidate, says he's going to give £110,000 of donations. This bloke runs a PR company, gave money to the Labour Party, he's giving the donation back. It is the most awful mess. It brings the whole of Parliament into disrepute. I was talking to some leading political figures this afternoon. They were terrified after Keir Starmer, essentially sacked his candidate for betting against himself, because they say MPs make those sorts of bets all the time. And if the Gambling Commission now decides to do a trawl through every MP's recent political bets, they're terrified this will turn into something as bad as the expenses scandal. I mean, really, I suppose what's gripping me is essentially, is it that we've got these sort of, venal mediocrities in Parliament, or is it that we expect too much of our MPs? What I do think is this is the most appalling distraction from what should be a hugely important election debate about, how to get the growth rate up, how to deal with poverty, how to deal with this artificial intelligence industrial revolution that's coming down the track. We face so many huge challenges as a country, and the general election is now in the grip of some mad debate about bets being made by MPs. I mean, it is pretty depressing.
OK, Robert, you tell it like it is. For now, thank you very much. To be continued ad nauseum, as Robert says, probably right up until election day. Now, meanwhile, in other news, in a court on an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, one of the great security and political crises of our times is expected to end in the next couple of hours. The WikiLeaks founder, Julian Assange, campaigner for openness or threat to the lives of US servicemen and women, depending on your point of view, has just arrived at the court and is about to become a free man. He's done a deal with the US authorities. In the American court in the North Mariana Islands, no, me neither, a US judge will accept his guilty plea to one charge of plotting to obtain classified defence documents back in 2010. He's just flown in from prison. He should fly on home to Australia.
Leaving here, they're going to go out by gate 1.
More than 28 hours after leaving London, Julian Assange arrived in one of America's most remote and obscure territories. His WikiLeaks colleagues had documented much of his journey as he prepared to face justice and enter a single guilty plea before heading home to Australia and his anxious family.
I'm just so glad that Julian was able to survive. For him, it's been a daily struggle of survival.
The deal brokered by Assange's lawyers with the US Department of Justice is highly unusual, allowing him to enter a plea without entering mainland America.
Usually, the Justice Department won't negotiate plea deals while the person is still technically a fugitive. Even though they knew where he was, they would require first he be extradited back to the US before they'll negotiate that way. So here, they obviously made an exception to that.
More that keep walking by and one of them has a weapon.
This was the video Assange's organisation WikiLeaks obtained showing a US helicopter gunning down civilians, including 2 Reuters journalists in 2007.
Stay line out. Let me know when you get it. We'll shoot.
When WikiLeaks also hacked a massive trove of classified documents, it sparked a long-running battle with the US government. Assange's legal woes were compounded by rape allegations in Sweden. His subsequent flight to the Ecuadorian embassy in London became a 7-year battle of wills, until finally the Ecuadorians lost patience and he was hauled off to Belmarsh prison, awaiting extradition to the US.
The question about whether Mr. Assange was a journalist or not is actually not the right question. The question is, was he engaged in giving newsworthy information to the public? And I think it's clear that he was.
Assange portrays himself as a fighter for press freedom, but some think his leaks have endangered lives.
When I looked at some of that information, probably jeopardized people I was with or what I was doing in that. But anytime you release current active things in a zone of conflict, you're going to risk lives.
Julian Assange's odyssey around the world finally brings to an end this long-running saga which pitted the WikiLeaks founder against the might of the US government. A case in which the Department of Justice finally got what it wanted, a guilty plea, and one in which Julian Assange has finally won his freedom. Dan Rivers, News at 10, Washington.
So, Julian Assange's long-running war on secrecy finally looks to be over. A lot has happened since 2010 when WikiLeaks, the website he founded, released that video showing a US helicopter firing at civilians during the Iraq War, along with hundreds of thousands of classified military documents. Later that year, a Swedish court ordered his arrest over rape and sexual assault allegations that he's always denied. Whilst on bail, Assange sought asylum in the Ecuadorian embassy in London, where he stayed for 7 years. Eventually, the Swedish case was dropped, but Ecuador revoked his asylum and police were able to arrest him. It was then that the United States announced they wanted to extradite him so he could face espionage charges there, which, despite being granted 2 years ago, has been tied up in appeals. Then, today's news of a plea deal. Julian Assange agreeing to plead guilty to one charge of espionage, arriving tonight in the Northern Mariana Islands, a US territory. Now, Debbie is on the island of Saipan, where we are expecting Julian Assange to appear before a judge in the next hour or so.
Julian Assange has already arrived here at the courthouse in Saipan. This is going to be the biggest case on the docket at the district court here today, perhaps the most high-profile case they've ever had on the island. This is a sleepy tropical US territory in the middle of the Pacific Ocean that has been suddenly thrust into the global spotlight. But there's not the media frenzy here outside the court that you might expect for a case of this profile, given how remote it is and how difficult it is to get here. The case is going to begin at 9 a.m. local time, and we don't expect it to take long. He will enter that guilty plea to the national security charges. We expect the plea will be accepted, and then the judge will confirm that his time has been served. He will then emerge from this court as a convicted criminal in the United States, but a free man. We then believe that he will head straight back to the airport and get back on that private jet to return to Australia to be reunited with his wife, his children and his mother. They have said that they are relieved that this ordeal is finally over, but they won't believe it until they see him in a matter of hours.
Debbie speaking to me a little while ago just outside the court. Now, violence, death and chaos have been visited on Kenya's capital city, Nairobi, and in particular its parliament, which at one point was set on fire. Protesters, angry about tax rises, stormed the building and got inside. They in turn were fired on by police in what, as we are about to see, are distressing scenes. At least 5 protesters were shot dead.
This is the consequence of the growing cost of living, of the growing hunger for change. And it's the voice of Generation Z, of young men, many armed only with smartphones, the real weapon behind this movement. Police moved in against a protest planned not in the shadows, but over TikTok for all to see. Even as army vehicles crept through the streets, it was clear that the direction of the day would be decided not by the men behind the wheels. The half-sister of former US President Barack Obama was among the protesters.
They're demonstrating with flags and banners. I can't even see anymore.
Spluttering as tear gas came in. Then hundreds went on the move. Some breaching the barricades around the parliament, where the new tax proposals were being debated. Flames and fury over the cost of bread and cooking oil. Then finally into the chamber, as the 25th of June became Kenya's January 6th.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm here to address you. You must go. Ruto must go.
Ruto is the president who addressed the nation tonight, saying a crucial conversation had been hijacked by criminals.
I shall continue to lead a government that is fully committed to maintaining the integrity of our state, promoting the unity of our nation, and enhancing the peace and security of all citizens and their livelihoods.
A promise of an end to the violence, but not to the problems which have brought people onto the streets. Protesters say they will return. Rohit Kaptru, News at 10.
Now we'll take a short break now, but still to come on the programme. England may be through, but that is where the good news ends. We'll have reaction from here and Germany. And the man who helped create the computer system blamed for causing the post office scandal says he thought it was working well. That and more in just a few moments. Welcome back. England captain Harry Kane won't like the pundits saying it, but they were sloppy against Slovenia. They could only manage a 0-0 draw tonight in the Euros against a team 50 places below them in the world rankings. Still, England were already through to the knockout stages and have actually ended up winning their group. That does at least mean they avoid some of the strong teams on the other side of the draw.
Mad dogs and Englishmen and all that. It's been scorching in Cologne today, the perfect excuse to keep hydrated. Every one of the many thousands here desperate to avoid Germany next and desperate for a performance worthy of the superstars in England's ranks. For the players, the heat is on, but not even close to how they would have wanted to do it. They top the group, they're on the right side of the draw, but boy, is there some work to do.
Well, I thought we were much improved with the ball. We've created some good openings, and at the moment, you know, it's hard work for us. We're not quite getting that break in front of goal. I thought the boys that came on had a really good impact on the game, and you know, we've had the discipline to keep a clean sheet, which has ended up meaning we top the group. So I understand some reactions, but it's a strange environment we're playing in.
And there's not much time to get it right. Steve Scott, News at 10, Cologne.
Well, it's never easy being an England fan when the promise isn't matched by performance. Armchair fans were put through the ringer again tonight, and fan zone pundits were still not impressed.
Come on, England! Come on, England! Come on!
The Three Lions' final group game of Euro 24. England are through to the last 16 before a ball's been kicked, so it's party time in Birmingham, but the hats say it all. Results so far fine, performance not so much. Never mind, there's always the old songs, Sweet Caroline in Cologne, and a cannon marking kick-off in Manchester. Back in the Midlands, the nerves kick in, but they're soon yawning in London. Best speed up the next 20 minutes or so. Southgate's team aren't at the races. It's more of the same. Suddenly, England turn up and Saka scores. Spirits soaring, beer flying, but it's disallowed. Delight becomes dismay, and by half-time, dejection setting in.
We played awful. We're rubbish. Too slow. Way too slow.
Hopefully the second half will be better.
Rice again! It briefly looks like it might be. A Rice shot on goal, finally bringing England close, but soon shoulders are slumping. They bring the band back on in Manchester to try to lift spirits, if only England could find their rhythm. But it's uninspiring, underwhelming, and over at last. The final whistle. Boos in London. A stunned silence in Birmingham. a unanimous verdict.
It's a demoralising group winners. I don't feel confident for the knockout stage.
They didn't perform. That's that for me.
We'll see what happens in the next round, but it doesn't give us much confidence going into the next game.
Job done, emotions mixed to put it mildly. Not many fans will describe the glass as half full tonight. England are through, top of the group. It just doesn't feel like it. Rachel Younger, ITV News.
And let's go back to Steve in Cologne. Steve, Gareth Southgate said it was a better performance. Was it? Is there anything for England fans to be positive about tonight?
Well, I think we can start with the good news, and that is by topping the group, Tom. It means they avoid an awful lot of big teams on the other side of the draw, and the next game, the first knockout game, will be against a third-place side. But, and it is a very big but, that first half was turgid, lacking adventure, lacking ambition. I think there were improvements in the second half, but Gareth Southgate has now got to have some serious questions with himself about who starts the next game. Cole Palmer, for example, he came on tonight, he was given 20 minutes, he made such an impact. So can he be ignored again? There really has to be a lot of improvements. I think fans leaving here tonight were thinking, how can a team with so much possession, so many superstars in it, fail to score and fail to win a game comfortably?
OK, Steve, let's see. Thank you very much indeed. The Scottish National Party set out its climate policies today with an emphasis on a fair transition from fossil fuels to green energy. The SNP wants, like Labour originally said it did, an annual £28 billion green investment to grow the economy, protect jobs and achieve net zero. The party called on Sir Keir Starmer to recommit to that level of investment. It has not ruled out issuing new oil and gas.
We don't believe in a drill approach that the Tories have set out. You know, they've basically said it's a blank cheque for new licences. That is not the way to transition away from oil and gas. But equally, Labour seem to be taking an irrational approach and not supporting the workers to properly transition.
It is almost as if the Post Office IT inquiry is hosting a game of pass the parcel over who is to blame for so many wrongful convictions of sub-postmasters. Today, a former Fujitsu programmer with the title Distinguished Engineer claimed Post Office lawyers tried to put words into his mouth. It was in part Gareth Jenkins's words that led to the unjust jailing of a pregnant sub-postmistress. He said he didn't realise she was expecting.
At work, he was honoured with the title Distinguished Engineer.
I swear by Almighty God.
As an expert witness, his evidence helped jail innocent people. Even today, Gareth Jenkins trusts the IT system he did so much to build.
In general, the systems, I believe, were operating as they should.
Robustly. He's just the latest witness to this inquiry to claim the benefits of hindsight.
I was confident, and possibly wrongly so, that that when problems did occur, they were quickly fixed and they weren't left to sort of fester.
Knowing what you know now, would you adopt the same approach of relying on your confidence?
I think I'd have to say that with hindsight, I would have done things differently, yes.
Among those he helped convict was Seema Misra, imprisoned while pregnant for a theft she didn't commit.
I believe I did tell the truth and the whole truth.
Mr. Jenkins pleaded ignorance of his legal duty to reveal Horizon's flaws to her trial. And he revealed he came under pressure from Post Office lawyers to harden the case against him.
I just assumed that this was normal practice. I had no experience to compare it with.
Did it not make you feel uncomfortable?
Yes, it probably did make me feel uncomfortable, which is why I resisted it.
It doesn't tally, isn't it? Like apologies, it looks like it's becoming like a ritual now. So when they come to the inquiry, as it in public domain, they have to apologise, even if they don't mean it.
For Mr. Jenkins, there is more at stake than his reputation. He faces a police investigation into potential perjury. And he's been warned there may be questions he chooses not to answer for fear of incriminating himself.
Will you apologise to Seema Misra, Mr. Jenkins?
He says he's truly sorry for Miss Misra's wrongful conviction. He's due to spend 3 more, sometimes uncomfortable days, giving evidence. John Ray, News at 10.
A Chinese spacecraft has pulled off what none has managed before, bringing back to Earth rock from the dark side of the moon. The capsule containing the samples parachuted back to Earth in China's Inner Mongolia region. Now finally, to a haunting family saga about one man's musical legacy that was almost lost forever. The music, rooted in pre-war Hungary, ended when the Jewish songwriter was confronted with Nazism. He survived hard labour and indeed a concentration camp before escaping to Britain. Now his granddaughter has found a cache of cassettes he recorded in the 1980s towards the end of his life. Graced with his musical DNA, she has turned them into an album.
This is the sound of a man who was once a star, but whose music only lived on in these tapes. Stephen de Bastian was a celebrated songwriter in pre-war Hungary, but as a Jewish performer, his career was cut short during the Holocaust. His music almost forgotten until his granddaughter uncovered hundreds of tapes he recorded in later life.
We just found the most incredible treasure trove of stuff and memorabilia, from original sheet music, a lot of it was handwritten, to concert pamphlets from his shows in the 30s.
But a world of glamour suddenly descended into one of horror. These photos show Stephen being forced to do hard labour on the front line. Of more than 1,000 Jewish men, he was one of only 8 to survive. And then he was sent to a Nazi concentration camp.
Hearing the story from his own voice and following in his footsteps, it was very hard to be confronted with what he went through.
Although Stephen survived and came to Stratford-upon-Avon, he was never able to restart his career. Now, more than 80 years on, his music is being brought back to life, thanks to his granddaughter.
Dream of happy things.
Roxanne is also a musician and has used the tapes to restore and re-record his songs into an album of new music.
So sleep, my little child. It's a huge privilege to bring his music back to life, and I thought this was a wonderful opportunity to, yes, hopefully put Stephen back in the spotlight. Show me how to dance again.
Stephen died shortly after Roxanne was born, but it is through her, performing together across time, that he is finally being heard again.
This melody will make you dream of me.
Sam Holder, News at 10.
That's it. Good night. Thanks for watching.